There we go. We are live. Hello, everybody. This is Moana Bywater from Better Day Printables. My products help busy families get organised so that they can get through the to-do list faster, creating more time to do the fun stuff. Today, we're going to be talking about neurodiversity, and it is a big topic. And for parents of children who are neurodiverse, at times it can feel overwhelming. So today we're going to be speaking with Vanessa Victor from Remarkable Minds, and she deals with neurodiverse children and adults every day. And so she is going to share with us what it means to be neurodiverse. She's going to teach us a little bit more about it. And she's also going to give us some tips and tricks on how to cope more easily. Hello, Vanessa. How are you?
Hey, Moana, thank you so much for inviting me along to talk. I really love what you do, and it's just amazing to be able to talk to people about this. So, as Moana said, I'm Vanessa Victor from Remarkable Minds, and I'm a licensed Davis facilitator. So my journey is I had this beautiful little boy who was so confident and, so full of joy, and we sent him off to school and he couldn't read and write like the other kids. And that just sent us on this journey of lots of tears, lots of angst, lots of frustration. I just didn't know what was going on. And eventually we found out he was dyslexic. And, that made a lot of sense. And then it was like, well, what do we do? What do we do about this? So we did a Davis program, and the change in my son was just amazing. So fast forward a few years, I returned to New Zealand and was looking for a career change, and thought, oh, well, maybe I'd like to find out more. And in my training, I found out that I was dyslexic. So it was a really big shock for me. My picture of being dyslexic was that you reversed letters and you had trouble with reading and writing. And, I didn't have those struggles, but dyslexia affects me in other ways. So that really started my journey with neurodiversity. So I know what it's like to be a parent of a child who's struggling, and I also know what it's like to have that confusion within yourself as well. So yeah, that's my backstory.
So tell me a little bit more about what is meant by the term neurodiversity and how dyslexia fits in with that.
So neurodiversity is really just looking at people who process information differently in their brain. Now, what we used to know about dyslexia was actually from, the data wasn't gathered when the brains were actually reading or thinking. So when MRI scans came along, we actually learned a lot more. And what they realized is that people with dyslexia or ADHD or Dyscalculia or Dyspraxia or any of these labels that we hear just use their brain differently. So they predominantly process information using the right side of their brain. And when you process information with the right side, it's more visual. So it's more visual, it's more feeling based. Linear sequential thought is more of a left-brained activity. So everybody has a preference,
Right.
And you can be a mix. Like I think for me, medicine or science has kind of wants to put people in these little categories. Yeah, you're dyslexic, you're ADHD, but our brain is too complex to be compartmentalized like that. And really, it's like a mixture. So it's like a cocktail. So ADHD might be vodka, and maybe dyslexia is gin, and maybe Asperger's is sherry. I don't know. And everybody has their own little mixture. Everybody has their own, different traits. So I take a very whole person view and whole brain view. You might be dyslexic with a little bit of ADHD. You might be ADHD with a little bit of dyslexia. The labels don't actually matter. It's just how you're processing information in your brain. So, the science, we're learning more and more and more about our brains. And, what we're seeing is that everybody is born processing the world using that right-hand side of their brain. You don't know your mum because she has the word mum written across her. You know, we don't use words to learn how to walk, you know, to navigate our way in the world. We're actually using that visual side of our brain, that right-hand processing. And it's just for some people, that's the way that they prefer to take in information. Mm.
So you mentioned sort of a linear approach and I suppose a non-linear approach. So traditionally, the learning environment, for example, might be a linear learning environment and a sequential learning environment. So for children and adults who are neurodiverse, what sort of challenges does this present in a world that may not be catering for them as it does for left-hand brain thinkers?
Yeah, and that's such a good question, Moana. You know, I have this saying that our kind of whole society is set up for left brain success. So left brain success is, you know, you do well in spelling tests, you know, you do well in your exams, you can remember your times tables, you can remember what pi equals. You know, it's all very, you have to do exactly what the other person is doing, and you're then graded against a standard. So when you're processing information in the left brain, you can remember these things really easily. But when you're a right brain processor, you just don't think in a linear sequence, okay? So if you think about looking at a picture, for instance, sorry, my Siri's just gone off. If you think about looking at a picture, we don't start looking at the left-hand side of the picture and then go across it little segment by segment. We look at a picture and we look at the whole thing. And we take in all types of information. Maybe it emotionally connects with us. You know, maybe we look at the top and then the bottom. So if you think your brain, when it's processing visually, is taking in all information like it's a picture. Okay, so we don't naturally see a sequence. We don't naturally think in one linear line. And, you know, I think it's really difficult, especially for some adults, actually, because dyslexia is quite a new, well, it's not new, but in New Zealand, it was only recognised in 2007. So that's actually really late. That's, yeah, crazy, huh? That's when schools officially recognise dyslexia. So, you know, I think the thing that I find is children know that they can't do what everybody else can do. You know, I think schools are great. In my day, you literally had like the slow class and, you know, the brainy class. You know, we were all very stream A, stream B, stream C. And then there were the kids that didn't even make it into stream C, you know. And schools have got much better. You know, they tend to call groups, you know, the cheetah group and the lion group and the jaguar group. But at the end of the day, kids still know who can read well and who can't. Yeah, you know, kids are very, very, very perceptive. And if your child is one of those children that doesn't think the same way, that doesn't learn the same way, they'll be looking around and thinking, well, everybody else seems to be able to do this really easily and I can't. So, you know, yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, so you mentioned the reading side of things and the children who have challenges with reading. What other things might be an indicator or something that the child struggle with? I think in the past you mentioned to me something to do with recollection of memories or their working memory. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly. So all of these kind of neurodiverse conditions, you know, children can struggle with working memory. So what that means is they can struggle to hold a sequence of instructions in their mind. Now, what this looks like when you're a parent is you can say to your child, okay, go upstairs and clean your teeth, get your school bag ready for tomorrow, and put your pajamas on and put the Lego away. Okay, now what happens for that child that is a visual thinker is they actually picture themselves going upstairs. So you're saying to them, go upstairs and clean your teeth. So they're actually visualizing in their mind, okay, here I am going upstairs, cleaning my teeth. And then they might start thinking about their bath toy, or they might get distracted by another thought. So even though your voice is still speaking, what they're seeing in their head isn't what you're saying. So they'll get upstairs and they'll go, that's right, I need to clean my teeth. And then they have no memory of anything else. They just can't picture what you said. So it's the ability to hold those instructions in their working memory. And that is often one of the weaknesses that we'll see with these children. Often it can feel like they don't hear. You know, auditory processing disorder is something that I hear a lot. There's nothing mechanically wrong with their ears. It's actually that they're having a hard time picturing what you're saying. That's actually what's happening there. So it does look like that. It looks like they're not listening, but they are. They're just finding it hard to have a sequence of pictures that they need to follow.
So for those parents who have children who aren't responding very well to verbal cues, this might be a good thing to keep in the back of their mind. Perhaps it's not to do with them being disobedient or not listening. It's literally due to the way that they're processing that information. And so, but I guess what you were talking about with regards to all of the emotional side of things, the perception, I guess that's an amazing benefit for children or for people who are neurodiverse. So could you tell us a little bit about that side of things?
Sure. And I guess just before I go on to that little bit, I'd just like to say, you know, that's where I think these planners that you've made are just so fantastic, Moana. You know, for parents that I work with, I'm often saying to them, you know, use pictures, don't use words. So I think the ability to create a picture checklist for your child is going to be so much more valuable. And if you can just think to yourself, they're only going to remember that one thing. So maybe instead of giving them 5 instructions, you just say, okay, go and do the first picture and then come back to me. And then you can look at the second picture and say, and when you've done that, come back to me, you know? So it's a really beautiful way of helping manage that organization, because organization can be tricky. So I just think the customizable charts for me are just the bomb. They are so good. And if your child is maybe a little bit Asperger's or a little bit of autism, you know, then being able to have a picture of their bag is going to be really powerful, because some children, you could have a picture of a bag, but they might not connect that to their own school bag. So being able to have a picture of their own school bag up there is going to be amazing. So what are some of the positives, you know? And I think that's the thing. It's very easy to focus on the negatives of dyslexia and ADHD and dyspraxia and Asperger's and autism. It's very easy to see what's a struggle. You know, these children have an amazing ability to connect. So a lot of these children have really quite wide perceptions. So although you might feel like they ignore you, they will hear a lawnmower 3 streets away, you know. So they have this ability to really feel each other's emotions or other people's emotions as well. So you tend to find a lot of these children are very have a lot of empathy. And, you know, and I know autism is a little bit different, but actually they have so much empathy, they get overwhelmed. That's actually what's happening with those individuals. They are so sensitive that they find it overwhelming. The ability to think outside the box, the ability to create, you know, the ability to problem solve, to look at things differently. And if our kids were tested on kindness, if our kids were tested on, you know, you can really feel that that child's not doing too well, and go up and try and be their friend. You know, if our kids were tested on what we're doing to the environment and how passionate they are about it, these kids would be getting top of the class, you know.
Yeah.
So it really is about celebrating those differences. And Albert Einstein has an amazing quote, which I'll try and remember exactly, but it's knowledge takes you from A to B, and imagination will take you around the universe. And it is. And, you know, Steve Jobs would never have invented the Apple iPhone if he didn't think differently. You know, Thomas Edison would never have invented the light bulb if he didn't think differently. So it is a real talent, but certainly in school, you know, school is an institution and teachers do the best they can, but it certainly is an institution that is very left-brained valued. It just makes it easier if you're left-brained thinker in school.
And I think, I mean, schools, I'm sure, will have a lot of resources that they can tap into, some experts that they can call in. But for parents in the home, where perhaps they haven't got access to those resources, be it financial or knowledge, whatever reason it might be, what are some tips for these parents to be able to kind of take the benefits and use them, and also just adjust their day, or nurture their child to make sure that they can still flourish despite the challenges?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Moana. And, you know, I really struggled with this with my own son, because we would spend days trying to learn the word the, and he would get it and I'd be like, yes, and then we'd open a book and he wouldn't know the word. And I used to get so frustrated because I was putting his intelligence, I was putting that value on his ability to spell. So, and that's just because I didn't know any better. You know, now it's about recognizing their talents, recognizing what they're good at. And as I said, kids know that they can't do what other kids do. They're very aware of that. So I think it's about really, you know, you might talk to them about Lego. You know, my son struggled to spell, but he would sit down and make these amazing Lego models, which of course now was him using that 3D visualization, you know. So it's about talking to them about not placing their worth on where they are in spelling or where they are in reading or their ability to remember times tables. You know, what I would say though is you have to really be on board with that. Okay, so these kids are very, very intuitive. They're very clever. They read information, but they read information that isn't written down in words. So they are really aware if you're saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter, but inside you're thinking, oh my God, it really does matter, they're going to get confused.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, I do get questions about, should I get diagnosed? You know, when should I go and get my child diagnosed? And, you know, what I say to that is, who are you getting the diagnosis for? You know, who is that for? Is that for your child, or is that for you because you need that certainty, or is it because the school is pushing for it? You know, and there's a benefit and a deficit to being diagnosed. And I would really say it depends how you feel about labels. For us, we'd been struggling for so long and couldn't understand why my son couldn't read and was falling further and further and further behind. So when we found out he was dyslexic, we could talk to him about what that meant. We were just like, it means you process information differently. That's all it means. There's nothing wrong. You know, you're not stupid. You just do things in a different way. And then we could talk to him about the positives. So, yeah, but I think, you know, you just have a think about how you feel about those labels, because your child will pick up, not your words, he will pick up, or they will pick up how you're feeling about it. So sorry, and I
It
think I
sounds
went
a
off on
little
a bit
bit.
of a tangent.
No, 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 no. That's all absolutely brilliant. Bringing it back to the home, it sounds like
Yeah.
it's really about changing the expectations. So
Mm-hmm.
the way that we might expect our neurotypical child to behave or to follow a certain structure during the day, those same expectations can't actually be held for a child who is neurodiverse. And that's certainly something that we've found in our family. There are definite differences between children anyway, but when you've got a child who is neurotypical and a child who is neurodiverse, it's about
Yeah,
figuring out what tools work for each of those children rather than finding out what overarching tool works for them both. That's certainly
exactly.
been our experience.
Yeah.
So other than sort of changing expectations, using visual cues like the charts, what else can be done? What are some really basic steps for parents to be doing in the home just to try and make their days a little bit easier on those days that do feel quite overwhelming? What is it, sort of relaxation strategies, or what would you recommend?
Yeah. And, I do think lockdown has been particularly tough because I think,
Absolutely.
we're all, it's been tough for me. My boys are teenagers now. And it's been tough because potentially you're seeing things that maybe you before were happening at school. So it might be
Mm,
quite confronting for a lot of parents. And it's especially struggling if you do have children that are on the spectrum. And that's quite a specialized topic, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. But that probably is quite a specialized little segment. So, the first thing I would say is one of the things we do is we tend to say in 5 minutes, or you can have 25 minutes. Our beautiful little ADD or dyslexic or Asperger's children have no concept of how long that is.
time.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, they have no concept of time. So, there is a really great app called Time Timer. And I think we're going to put some links at the end of this, so I can put that in one of them.
Yes.
But a time timer is a visual way of showing time. So I'm just going to quickly pop it up now. Let me see. So can you guys see? Oh, where's my camera? I don't know if you can see that.
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's
Nice.
visual time. So that's one thing I would say when you're talking to
Mm,
them about how long they have, just be aware that they don't have that concept of time. The other thing I
mm,
would say, and I'm sure we all have this, I don't know about you, but my kids have been on devices loads more than they normally go on them. And instead of saying to them, come off in, 5 minutes and expect them to come off exactly in 5 minutes, you might be better saying,
mm,
okay, you need to come off that now. And, if they're like, oh, but I'm in the middle of this level and I've just built this thing in Minecraft and I'm going to lose it all, or, that stuff
yeah.
they say, say to them, okay, well, you can finish that and then you can come off. And if
Mm,
you do that, then you'll get a little bit longer next time. So kind of put the picture that if they do that, there's going to be a reward for them. So that would be another little tip. The other thing I
mm.
would say is, as I said, these children are really sensitive and emotional. So, if there is a day where it is driving you nuts and you are getting really upset, it's much better that they go and build Lego or go and play outside, and they don't do the maths homework, or they don't do the spelling homework,
Mm,
or they don't do whatever task it is, because you need that space and that time. So what I would say is these kids, as I've
mm.
said, are very sensitive at that. So if you're getting really, really frustrated with them because they're not doing what they should do, take a break. Like, take a 15-minute break. You go off
Yeah.
and do whatever you need
Parents
to do.
time out as well.
Yeah, and exactly. And
Yeah.
timeout has got like oh, you're on the naughty step. It's not. It's just like, come away and reset, and then come back to it. And at the end of the day, you're their parent. You're not their teacher. You don't have to have that same relationship with them. So that would be another tip. So time, they don't have a sense of time. So try and use visual time cues. And I'm not talking about 5 minutes on a clock. That doesn't mean anything for them, If you can find a visual time, and just, be aware that sometimes you're better to just take yourself out of the situation and diffuse it, because you have that ability and they don't. And then, as I've said, I think your charts are fantastic for these families, because it takes the stress out of, oh, but I told you to go and do that, why can't you remember? It's all negative. It's just like, okay, have you done the first picture? Okay, come back. Right, you need to go and find the second picture. Yeah, it can be a lot calmer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, just to summarize what you said there, so we've got the benefit of structure and a routine, but
Yeah,
being flexible around that. So not having that, this time, but a little bit, when you've finished that. And I think that ties into the if and when, or sorry,
yes,
when and then approach. When you have finished the dishes, then you can, that kind of approach.
absolutely.
And the timer, the visual timer as well, and then having a physical activity break rather than sort of being always
Yeah,
down on the screen or on their schoolwork,
yeah.
and changing
You
our
know,
expectations.
yeah, yeah. And these learners, our beautiful learners learn by doing. So they learn from experience. So that's the difference, you see. Some people learn by reading a book, and that's more that left-brained processing. But a right-brained person who mainly uses the right-hand side of their brain, they're going to remember what they did, or they will remember the experience. They won't remember what they've read. So just, always be thinking about that. You can gain knowledge from so many different places. It's just traditionally we think about reading knowledge, I'll never forget when my son had to read, I can't remember what book it was now, he had to read a book for school. And, we'd done the Davis program and he had huge changes, but this was still going to be a struggle. And, the old me who didn't know much about this would have forced him to read the book. Then I just looked at it and thought, actually, if he watches the movie, he's going to get so much more information that's relatable to him. So it's just little things like that, just to have that in your mind. You can learn through lots of different ways. It doesn't have to be the reading and writing.
This, you mentioned before, we're talking about schooling, and I just want to come back to that, because I imagine that there are some parents who suspect that their child is neurodiverse. They haven't had them formally tested, and perhaps they're not getting the support from school that they feel is necessary
Yeah.
because they haven't had that formal diagnosis. So with regards to the formal diagnosis, something that you mentioned to me previously, which I thought was really, really interesting, was that in New Zealand, um, they don't require the formal diagnosis until year 10. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So
Yeah. Could
really,
you just explain a little bit more about that?
sure, sure. So you need a educational psychologist's report in year 10 to be able to get assistance in NCEA. So, my son had a reader-writer for the exams. Now, we needed that educational report in year 10 to gain that access. So that's actually when you need to get one. Before that, as I've said, that's a bit more of a personal decision. And,
Hmm.
it's good to get it if you need that actual, there is a bit of paper that says my son has dyslexia. But just be aware that they will really label everything out, APD, ADHD, dyslexia. It will be very, they'll put it all into little boxes. So that's one thing to remember. And the second thing is really, what I often say to parents is, you actually know deep down. Trust that gut feeling. And, your child can have a little bit of ADHD. Maybe they are autistic, and that kind of goes back to where I was saying before, think about who the diagnosis is for. If you want to be able to talk to your child about the positives and say, you have dyslexia, it means your brain processes information differently. That's why you find it really hard to read. And talk about it, that's fine. But equally, you can just talk to your child about your brain working differently. So I would say, if you had a jigsaw puzzle, you had the picture, but you only had Lego to put together, it wouldn't work very well, would it? If you tried to build Lego with having jigsaw pieces, it's not going to work. So, being different isn't a bad thing. If you have the jigsaw pieces and you build a jigsaw, fantastic. And if you have the Lego pieces, you can build Lego. Wonderful. It's just about being aware of the differences and celebrating them. But as I've said, a diagnosis, I would just kind of say to yourself, who am I getting this for? Am I getting it for me so that I know what's going on? And that's fine, because that's what I did. There's no right or wrong here. Or am I getting it because I do really want to tell, Reese that, yes, you are dyslexic? Or am I actually just happy thinking, I know he's thinking differently, and I know he's processing things differently, and that's actually all the information I need.
Yeah. Because knowledge is power, right? I'm so sorry. I've just noticed how
Yeah.
dark it is in here. I'm just going to stay on that light. I'm hiding away in my camper van because all my kitties are inside. So yeah, that's why it's very
Yeah.
dark. So what I was going to say is that knowledge is power, and I guess when we understand more about our children and how they are learning, then we are better equipped to give them the resources that they need to flourish and the support that they need to do that. So
Yeah.
if as far as support for those parents though who have not got a formal diagnosis, so if their child is struggling at school, and they school for whatever reason isn't really on board, isn't offering them the support that they need. So could you just tell us a little bit about the sort of support that they might be able to get without a diagnosis, like what you're able to do with children?
Sure. So after this, there's going to be some links coming up, and that's just a list of common characteristics that you might see in these children. So it's not a formal diagnosis, but it's kind of like a checklist where you can look and say, oh, I recognize that, I recognize that. I would say there's lots of information now on the internet, and books is still a good place to get some information. The one thing I would say is at schools, they're not really taught about neurodiversity. So teachers get about 6 weeks training in 3 years on children who think differently or dyslexia. So, a lot of the time, these teachers just don't know how to support these children, and the education system, they often try and repeat the same thing. And there's this wonderful saying that says something like, if I haven't understood it by the 3rd time you've told me, then telling me 10 times doesn't make any difference. You need to change the way that you are telling me this information. So yeah, I do feel for teachers as well, though, because they've got a lot of children in their class, and it is difficult. But yeah, I guess if you're not getting the support that you want at school, I would say Ron Davis wrote a great book called The Gift of Dyslexia, and he's also done one on ADHD called The Gift of Learning, which is a great resource. And, I'm happy if people want to send me some questions, I'm happy to answer more as well. But I will post the links for the common characteristics. And I think, the other thing I would say is I was completely surprised when I found out I was dyslexic. I mean, I just would never have ever imagined that. But once I actually understood what that meant, and, I have a few ADHD traits as well, understanding why I was doing something was such a relief. It just changed my whole inner self-talk. And it really made me understand there's a reason why I struggle with these things. And I think, you know, learning that acceptance and understanding is huge for both
Yeah.
you and your child, you know. So I would really encourage people to, if they've got that little inkling, you know,
Mm,
I kept thinking there's something wrong, you know, there's something wrong. And I would go to
mm.
school and they'd say, oh, he's just a boy, you know, they take longer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you just moved countries. Oh, you know, he'll be all right. He'll catch up. And I knew
Mm,
deep down something wasn't, I just knew. You know, I couldn't tell what it was. There's that intuition. I just knew something wasn't quite right. So trust your intuition. That's what I would say.
mm.
Because it can be a bit confronting for us parents, especially, you know, we don't grow out of dyslexia and ADHD, we just learn to hide it. And
Yeah.
so often when your child is struggling, it can really bring up some stuff for the parent, because it
Mm,
is hereditary. So, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And
yeah.
if your child has some of these tendencies, then potentially there could be some in your family too.
Yeah, which brings me on to the next point, which is that we are going to actually be having a whole new segment, aren't we? Which is going to
Yeah,
discuss neurodiverse adults and how we can cope with the challenges that that presents for us within the
yeah.
parenting role, especially because it can add an extra layer of challenge, without a doubt. So, Vanessa, we're going to put some links to where people can find you.
Mhm.
And I really do encourage you to have a look at Vanessa's website. Her reviews, or the feedback that she's got from clients are just so wonderful. And I'm frustrated with myself because there was one in particular that I wanted to read you, but I haven't got it up on my phone, and I'm not going to to digress. But if you go to her homepage, it's on there,
Mm.
and literally talking about changing people's lives, which I can totally relate to because. Yeah, the information that you're giving to families is just amazing, and the coping strategies that they're getting after working with you is really wonderful. So I did
Oh,
say
thank
that we were
you.
going to be able to do questions, but
Oh,
I
it's me
haven't
too.
managed to get the question feed come up. So if you have got any questions, then fire them in the comments underneath the interview, and we can perhaps Vanessa can come back to those later on. But yeah,
Yeah,
just wanted
yeah.
to say thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And you know, Moana, at the end of the day, I just think we really need to change our perception of these of this neurodiversity, and the world is changing. Like it is changing. But I
Mm,
just think that these beautiful individuals are so creative, you know, they're such rebels, they're such out of the box thinkers, and they've got so much to give. And if we can just protect them through that little schooling journey, because that's often where they start that negative self talk. So, you know, if people do have questions, please, I'm happy to answer them. My website desperately needs updating, so, but I haven't done that yet. But anyway, and yeah, I think, you know, learning some tools on and some tips. And you know, once again, I just love that your charts are so customizable, and you've put that dyslexia font on it, which is fantastic. And just, you
yeah.
know, the last thing I would say is our way of doing things is to write a list. You know, that's not going to work. Use pictures, pictures, you know,
Mm,
use pictures, use visual clues, because that's what your children will relate to. And you know, they're not being naughty on purpose, and they're not listening on purpose. It's just they're just processing the world a
mm.
little bit differently. And yeah, just, you know, if you can accept that and become aware of it, it's going to make everybody's life so much easier.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. And
Mm,
yeah,
been
as we
great.
say, really looking forward to any questions that might come through. And
Yeah.
wishing you all a wonderful day, and a huge thank you to Vanessa.
Oh, it was lovely.
Awesome.
Thanks, Moana.
Thanks so much. See ya.